Well, game 3 between the Panthers and the Oilers, and in the second, Florida up by 2. Oilers unable to get the puck into the Panther zone. They lose it. And how about Sam Bennett? Nice stick work there as Florida goes on to win 6-1. So it wasn't even a shot of going to OT. In this one, Florida protecting home ice in convincing fashion. And listen, Stuart Skinner, you know, not all the goals that were scored on him were his fault, but it's going to go on his resume, right? 18 saves. He was pulled midway in the third period. And Sergei Bobrovsky, this goaltender is playing absolute lights out. Absolute lights out. And with that, we bring in CBS Sports NHL writer Pete Blackburn and former Vegas odds maker Todd Fuhrman for a recap of Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. From the opening minute, y'all, the Panthers, they were the aggressor. And they did look back, crushing Edmonton 6-1. Pete, I'll start with you. What type of statement did they make here with this total domination of the Oilers?
Yeah, it couldn't have looked better for the Panthers. Couldn't have really looked worse for the Oilers. I think that was domination, basically every single aspect of the game. It was a real tough look for Edmonton, especially mentally, because they commit 3 offensive zone penalties in the first period. And I don't know if you remember the pregame hit that we did. That was one of my keys to the game, was for Edmonton to avoid those offensive zone penalties that they've been committing all series so far. And not a good start. And just as the game went along, it looked like Florida was just dragging them into the mud and breaking them mentally, physically, and on the scoreboard. So it could not have been more lopsided after 2 of the closest games that we've seen these playoffs. The third one really tilts the scale in Florida's favor here. And maybe it's just a flush type of game for Edmonton. You burn the tape, you move on. But I think for a Florida team that has been much worse at home during these playoffs, that was a nice statement win if anybody was worried that they weren't going to be able to get the job done on their home ice.
You mentioned it, Pete. I mean, the lack of discipline we saw evident from the Edmonton Oilers right from the opening puck drop, and it kind of snowballed into a crescendo in that third period that I'll go as far as saying that was embarrassing. There's ways of trying to assert yourself physically and to try and wear down your opponent going into what should potentially be a long series. But what we saw from Edmonton in that third period, in my opinion, not only showed a lack of discipline, showed a lack of leadership as well. If you want to mix it up, by all means, go for it. But the slashes, the cheap shots, and everything else just snowballed. And you could see, to Pete's point, that it looked like it broke this Oilers team mentally. I also have no idea whatsoever why number 97 and 29 are out on the ice with 3 minutes to go after Edmonton had shown that they were going to take shots at absolutely everybody wearing a Florida Panthers sweater. And I think that gets Florida's attention. There's one way to try and finish out a game and make sure that you're letting Florida know, you know what, you may have beaten us in this game, but the war is far from over. All that did is continues to draw the ire. Florida can laugh their way to the bank in that particular game. And no, you're going to get Florida's best shot again right from the opening puck drop in Game 4 that comes up on Thursday night. This Oilers team has to be better. They have to be more buttoned up. And they also have to get a timely save or two from Stuart Skinner. I mean, how quickly we forget as well, guys, that Florida was good in the first period. I wouldn't say dominant, but takes that 2-0 lead into the break. Corey Perry scores on the power play, and suddenly we look like we're going to have another instant classic potentially on our hands. And then Florida ends up getting the go-ahead goal, making it a 3-1 game. Sam Bennett scores the breakaway to make it 4, and things continue to snowball from there. I'm not blaming this on Stuart Skinner by any stretch of the imagination, but somewhere along the way, we talk about it at this juncture of the season, your goaltender has to make a timely save and try and stem the tides. Edmonton wasn't able to do that offensively, on the defensive side, and in net. It was a full, complete, unmitigated disaster from the Oilers. And to Pete's point, let's see if they can flush it, or this series is going to be over heading into Game 4.
And Todd, you brought up the physicality, right? This was clearly the most physical out of all the 3 games. Plenty of big fights, including a big one in the third. A combined 128 penalty minutes between the two. Do you think Edmonton is going to regret this going into Game 4? Like, what do you think this sets the tone for as we look ahead to Game 4?
Oh, I don't think they set any tone. I think it was Bush League hockey that you see at the tail end of a men's league game when a team's getting embarrassed by a bunch of 19-year-old kids that are home from a D1 program that are skating circles around them. If you're going out there and trying to finish your checks, fine. That's the way playoff hockey is meant to be played. If you want your fourth line to engage with Jonah Gadjevic, AJ Greer, by all means go for it. But the chopping wood that we saw, the Evan Bouchard slash on Carter Verhaeghe and the Evander Kane skating by to give him a little bit of a stick wash, I don't know what this is from this Edmonton team. You're extremely skilled. The last thing that you want to do is try and give Florida anything else to light their fire going into the next game. And it clearly showed that this Oilers team's lack of discipline. They started the game that way. They may as well have finished. And as a hockey fan that was expecting Edmonton to be extremely competitive from start to finish tonight, I was disappointed because you're only down 3 goals going into the third. And while most likely you're not going to come back, they look like they wanted to turn this into a gutter war, more so than even try and chip into that Florida lead. Make it 4-2, and then you never know what could happen if you draw a penalty and have an opportunity to cut into that lead. But Edmonton saw some of that carryover from the second period, and extremely discouraging, and it almost felt like Coach Knobloch lost his team there in the third period and a lack of leadership up and down that roster.
Right, and further to your point about the nonsense in the third period, if you're going to start that stuff and you want to make a statement with it, win the battle, win the fights. Trent Frederick goes after Sam Bennett and gives him a couple cross checks, and it sparks a line brawl. And at the end of this whole shenanigans in the line brawl, the Oilers have lost 5 fights on the ice simultaneously. That can't happen. If you're trying to send a message with your physicality, make it count. Don't just be stupid and cheap. Make it count. And they just weren't able to do that. It feels like they're trying to get into Florida's head and beat them at their own game, and it just completely backfired on them in this game.
No, it did not work whatsoever. And Stuart Skinner, he was not working in this game. I know all the goals weren't his fault. So as we look ahead to Game 4, Pete, what's your confidence level in him?
Nobody can hit the reset button quite like Stuart Skinner. I mean, it can go both ways, both positively and negatively. I would have pulled him after the second intermission. I probably wouldn't have sent him out there for the third period at all. I think just from a rest standpoint, just from a protecting your goaltender standpoint, especially considering Sam Bennett is on the other team, not a situation I would have sent him back out there. But I don't particularly worry about this carrying over into Game 4 because I think both Stuart Skinner and the Oilers have shown many times up to this point they're capable of hitting the reset button, tossing a game away, and learning from it. And honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like this type of loss for the Oilers, how embarrassing it was, how lopsided it was, might honestly serve them better than a game where they make a mistake late in the game and they toss it away, or they just get beat small on the margins. This should be a wake-up call for Edmonton, and I think it can absolutely serve them in the long run in this series. And if you want to look back to last year's Stanley Cup Final, the Panthers got absolutely waxed in Edmonton in one of those games, and they end up winning the series. So just for the sake of big picture element, I don't think that we should overreact to a one-game sample in which they looked horrible. I think they're very capable of bouncing back from this, but obviously it was a very disappointing and pretty embarrassing effort in Game 3.
Pete, to your point, I'm very curious to see what we get from Edmonton right out of the opening gates. And sometimes we talk about having that extra day to hit that reset button. I wonder if Edmonton wishes we were running this back every other day with a chance to kind of flush this game a little bit sooner on Wednesday, giving them an extra travel day before a Game 5 in Edmonton. But here the Oilers are. And to Pete's point, look, this is an Oilers team that faced adversity last year against Florida. We fell down 3-0 in that series, was able to rattle off 3 games in a row, including that 8-1 game that Pete referenced in Game 4 that kind of sparked them. So let's see what the Oilers are made of. No one ever said winning the Stanley Cup was going to be easy, and you have these kind of games that are uncharacteristic of a team that's extremely skilled. The one thing, though, that Edmonton's going to have to adjust to, we saw pucks bouncing all over the ice early on, and it's something that we discussed early on. When you're playing in 92 degrees and humidity north of 60%, this sheet of ice isn't going to be nearly accustomed to what the Oilers deal with at home when they're able to make some of those tape-to-tape passes and use some of that speed, finesse, and precision. So they're going to have to get pucks deep. They'll have to finish their checks. They'll need to stay away from the shenanigans and stay out of the penalty box. And Chris, kind of putting a bow on what you asked about Stuart Skinner, I'm right there with Pete. I actually thought that Coach Knobloch would consider pulling him after he gave up the 4th goal on the breakaway to Sam Bennett. Not necessarily as a reflection for Stuart Skinner, but just to do something to kind of spark this team. We've seen Stuart Skinner do this. Game 4 appears to be where he flips a switch and he shows remnants, or I guess traces of looking like Dominic Hasek. He's going to have to be one of Edmonton's best players, and he's going to need to make a big save or two early on for this team to start to build some confidence. Because what we saw from Bob is indicative of how Bob has played at home. If Edmonton wants to turn into a track meet, not going to end well for them. So when I look at the Game 4 dynamics, I think the first team to 3 gets out of Sunrise with a win, and scoring that first goal may be more important than what we've seen even through the first 3 games in this series.
And the Panthers are now heavy favorites to win the Stanley Cup. So as we look ahead to the rest of this series, Pete, does it change like your opinion about who you think is going to win? Like, are you feeling like Florida has it in the bag, or there's still room for error, still room for Edmonton to get back in this thing?
It's definitely still room for Edmonton. Like Todd just mentioned, Stuart Skinner is Mr. Game 4. For whatever reason, he loves Game 4s, so at least they can fall back on that. But ultimately, like, there is a certain element of a reset button that needs to be applied after every single one of these games. Yeah, you can look at the greater trends and things that carry over from a bigger sample size in the series, but at the end of the day, a game like this can easily be flushed if you're in the right mindset, if you're, you have the right mentality and approach. And I think that the Oilers have shown time and time again, they are resilient. They can learn from getting smacked around a bit. Like, it's easy to forget at this point. They started this postseason with 2 straight losses against the LA Kings, and people were writing them off. People did not expect them to be in the Stanley Cup final where they are right now. They've given Florida a hell of a time through the first couple of games. There is no reason for them to think that they are out of this thing after one horrible night at the rink in Sunrise. So I'm not writing off the Oilers. I don't think anybody should write off the Oilers, but this certainly was an impressive and emphatic statement game from the Panthers in Game 3.
You know, I'm right there with you, Pete. I know what history says about teams that come into Game 3, get out with the win when the series tied at 1 apiece. We've seen 23 of those 30 teams go on to win the series. But look, history is made to be rewritten all the time. And if the Oilers are able to scratch out even a 1-goal decision in Game 4, suddenly we're headed back to Edmonton in a best-of-3 series where the Oilers will have 2 games in their barn with a chance to win the Stanley Cup. So to Pete's point, this series is far from over. We know recency bias is real, and the storylines are going to be tremendous from now until puck drop for Game 4 on Thursday night. But I think this is where the Oilers have to dig deep and realize, look, if Florida wants to try and drag them into the gutter, that's not the Oilers' game. There's playing physical and there's playing discipline. Edmonton has to find that balance. They need to stay out of the penalty box, play this game at 5-on-5, and look to get an early marker to try and play downhill with the lead, build some confidence for Stuart Skinner. But the one thing that I'm very interested to see unfold next game, will we get a tight whistle early on, or will the refs go, you know what, we're going to let these teams play, give them a little bit more wiggle room, because I think players are going to have to adjust pretty quickly if they're going to call that game tightly to try and take away from some of the shenanigans that we saw unfold, especially in the second and third period tonight.
The Panthers go up 2-1 in the series. We'll see how it all shakes out. The pressure now is on Edmonton. We'll really see what they're made of. And we saw last year, look, when their backs are against the wall, they know how to respond. Now it's about just getting the job done and winning those 4 games. Todd Fuhrman, Pete Blackburn, always appreciate talking to y'all. And so here's a look at the Panthers' history in the Stanley Cup Final. So last season they won their first Stanley Cup, 4-3-7, and then the year before that, they lost to the Golden Knights 4-1. You got to go all the way back to 1996 for the first Stanley Cup Final appearance where they lost in 4 games. Looking to go back-to-back here. Coming up, we go on site, people, to Sunrise as the Panthers demolish the Oilers in Game 3. There was no doubt about this one after the puck drop. Stay with us. You're watching CBS Sports HQ. And with that, we welcome in CBS Miami's Mike Cugno from Sunrise, Florida. And Mike, before we dive into the game, right, it looked like an electric atmosphere on TV, but you were there. So just give us a perspective. How loud, how amazing was the energy that you were feeling in that arena?
Yeah, it's hard to tell what got more cheers, some of the goals or the fights at the end of this game. Panther fans certainly appreciative of how players stepped up for their teammate, Sam Bennett. Gadjevich, Greer, those guys go into the box getting standing ovations, basically standing O for the 5 prize fighters that were on the ice there at the end of that third. But yes, it was an electric game. You had Bam Adebayo from the Miami Heat on the drum. You had DJ Khaled out here kicking off the party on the 1s and 2s. So it was a lot of fun in the building. Disappointing end, though. After the games we saw in 1 and 2, you thought we were getting grade A hockey. We did not see that tonight. The Panthers played their game for sure, but things just got ugly and disappointing considering what we saw back in Edmonton.
Now, Mike, you touched on the physicality, right, and all the fights. Edmonton tried to punk the Panthers, right, with cheap shots, dirty moves here and there. They failed, right, in that department, trying to throw them off their game when it comes to just a W. And then also the fights. They didn't even win their individual fights. So how do you digest all that, especially as we look ahead to Game 4?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you expect in sometimes losses where things get dragged into the mud. You might try to mix it up to try to spark something for the next one. This game's over, right? But when you see what Trent Frederick does to Sam Bennett, when you see what Evander Kane does to a prone Carter Verhaeghe on the floor, hitting him with the stick in the face, sometimes these things are just flat out uncalled for. And that's what we got out here. And that's why I said and used the word disappointed, because it got tiring after a little while. They started these fights with about 10 minutes left in the third, and they just keep going and going, just drag it out. It just wasn't fun to see. It looked like one team kept playing hockey, the other punted on the idea.
Very well said. Now, it was fun to see if you were a Florida Panthers fan, right? Their excellence when it came to whether drawing all those power plays or forcing a lot of power plays, the way Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand played. Carter Verhaeghe had a sensational goal. What stood out to you the most about the way this Florida Panthers team just handled the Oilers, who previously they were neck and neck in the first 2 games?
Offensively, puck movement. The way they were able to move the puck around and score some of these goals. The way they were also able to defend, they didn't really let the Oilers offense ever get behind them, which is something we saw a few times happen in those first 2 games. It was really the Panthers' first complete game, sustained pressure and success throughout the entirety of the 60 minutes on the ice. But something that stood out for me was something we talked about pregame was Sam Reinhart and Alexander Barkov going scoreless through the first couple of games. Barkov's physical play sparks the Sam Reinhart goal, and he gets on the board. And to me, I think that was a big moment, a big sigh of relief for fans to see those two Selke finalists, Barkov, of course, winning it, and Reinhart coming in second. Good to see those 2 guys get on the board.
Well, now, Mike, the Panthers are 2 wins away from repeating as Stanley Cup champs. Florida fans can taste it. Still a lot of hockey left to be played, but we appreciate the insight as always, man. Take care.
Got it.
And how about this? The Panthers are tied the second most all-time when it comes to most wins by 5 or more goals in a postseason. Guess who they're tied with? The Oilers, ironically, from 1984, and the Rangers and the Bruins.